as children, all of us were encouraged to give up something for Lent, and that kind of thought has stayed with me for a long time, and until quite recently, I suppose. And I remember I was in about fourth class in primary school when I gave up sugar one time, and of course I never went back on it. So that was one of the positive things that came out of giving up stuff. But that feeling of giving up things was part of my thoughts for Lent always. And as I got a bit older then, of course, instead of giving up sweets, I might try to give up things like bad language or something like that, and I might last for a day and go back on it again. So I suppose then basically was Lent was meant to teach us to try to live better and to do something better for your neighbour and to love people a bit better and maybe to forgive and do things like that. But in 1990 I was home from Ghana with malaria, and I had a very different experience, a new experience that stays with me today now for Lent at this time. And that is to look at Lent to do something positive for Lent. And how it came about was I was quite down now after having the experience of malaria. And I was staying in the house, SMA house in Maynooth, and I struggled to get up in the morning, any morning. I know that I was depressed after the malaria. But I managed to get up for Mass on first day, on Ash Wednesday, and the priest who was saying Mass that day, Father Des, gave a lovely homily. But unusually he said, you know, why not do something different for Lent? That instead of austerity, you might do something positive or do something nice, and especially do something nice for yourself. Wow, this was something really new to me, and I said, no, that cannot be, and how could it be? And I was always, and I still would, to find it easier to think of something to give up than to something to take on. So after Mass, when I couldn't figure out what to do myself, I went to Father Des and I said to him, any suggestions? And of course he said, well, how are you feeling? And I said, well, you know, I feel terrible at times and I feel very down. And, no, he said, okay, that's something now you can do for Lent, he says. Just think positive and start thinking differently. And do something nice for yourself as well, he said. So that was even more difficult to see what I could do nice for myself. So I decided I wanted to do penance. No, he said, don't forget about the penance now, do something nice. So anyway, the only thing I could think of doing was I went out for a walk. And that morning I went out to walk where I walked several times before, but for the first time I noticed God's creation. I noticed the huge trees around the places in Maynooth where I played hurling, up around Highfield. I'd say trees that were 200 years old. I hardly ever noticed them before, and I noticed the shrubs were beginning to get green because it was springtime. And for the first time, I began to see the beauty and God's gift of nature. So I said, okay, that's great. So the next morning, I had promised I would go out and experience the same thing again. But as I was getting up on the next morning, on the day after Ash Wednesday, I was woken by this sound of a blackbird outside my window. And I couldn't wait to get out of bed. I rushed over to the window to see where was the blackbird, but of course it was still dark and I didn't see any bird. But she got me out of bed anyway. And after that, of course, I had a long day, so I went for another walk again, as I promised myself I would. And that was even more fruitful than the day before, because I noticed now I could hear the lambs bleating and even see them skipping and playing in the fields. And the blossoms that weren't there yesterday, I noticed them, and the flowers that were in bloom. And so I began to see the new buds on the trees, the new life that was coming forth, and it was a joy. And so then I remembered as well then what Des had said to me, count your blessings. So I think the third or fourth day when I was out for my walk, I started thinking of all the blessings that God had given me, and I started thanking God for the smallest things to the greatest things I'd ever experienced. The things like my health, my family, my friends, my neighbours, You know, my work in Africa, the people in the parish in Africa, I had a huge list of gifts that I couldn't see the day before, because before Lent I had seen everything as a cross, everything to a big heavy cross to carry. But when I started thanking God, I saw gifts in front of me and gifts in my own life that I never noticed I had before. So it was a great experience. And now I often thank God now for that malaria, because if I hadn't that malaria, I wouldn't have been home, I wouldn't have been in that position to hear that homily. I would have missed out on the beauty of nature and God's great gifts to me. So now that we're going through the COVID pandemic, I'd say the same thing. Many people can be feeling down about their situation, and I'd say the same things maybe that, oh yeah, the third thing that I experienced that year was during Lent, when I made an effort to contact people, friends that I had known before, and they were in Dublin. And I contacted them, and of course they were delighted to hear from me. I know they were very sad that I was home with malaria, but they came out from Dublin to Maynooth to pick me up every weekend, either a Saturday or Sunday, to go for a long walk in one of the parks that was nearby. So that was the third thing that I experienced during Lent that time. And so during COVID now, I tried to encourage people to do those three things. To first of all, get out and about and see nature, and then to thank God for the blessings, and thirdly, to reach out to other people. And in that way, you will lift your spirits and realize that God is very near and that He's with us every day. And I have a poem that I like as well this time of year that I share. It's called The Sheep and Lambs by Catherine Tynan. All in an April evening, April airs were abroad. I saw the sheep with their little lambs and thought of the Lamb of God. The sheep with their little lambs passed me by in the road. All in an April evening, I thought of the Lamb of God. Up in the blue bloom mountains, where dewy pastures are sweet, rest for the little lambs, rest for the little feet. All in an April evening, April airs were abroad. I saw the sheep with their little lambs, and I thought of the Lamb of God.